strike fighter is amongst the most versatile of modern combat aircraft. Part fighter, part bomber, these aircraft excel in both offensive and defensive air combat. This video ordnance program looks at recent developments in the world's strike fighters. The single-seat fighter aircraft has dominated air combat since the earliest days of air warfare. Although mainly intended for fighting other aircraft, the fighter has long been used in a dual role. Fitted with bombs or other types of weapons, the fighter can also attack ground targets. In this ground attack role, it has often been called a fighter-bomber or strike fighter. Today's strike fighters differ enormously in their configurations and capabilities. They range from relatively simple aircraft, often derived from trainers, to enormously complex attack aircraft, specially designed for the ground attack role. And there are many variations in between. Recent advances in aerospace technology have considerably enhanced these dual-role capabilities. A good example was the combat performance of the Hornet Navy strike fighter during Operation Desert Storm.
There was one remarkable incident. There were two F-18s going on a bombing run. And these airplanes have supposed dual capability. That is, they're supposed to be able to fire either against aircraft or against ground targets. And that's not easy because the radar for ground targets would normally be quite different than an air-to-air radar. But what they did was much more impressive than that. They're on this run. They're jumped suddenly by two MiGs. They break off from the bombing attack. They switch to air-to-air format. They shoot down the two MiGs. Then they resume the bombing. Now, in the past, typically, if you were a fighter bomber and you would jump, you dropped your bombs and then fought. They didn't even have to drop their bombs. They kept the bombs on board, shot down the MiGs with missiles, and then resumed. That's quite a remarkable capability. That's something you would never have seen before. And I wouldn't attribute it just to the airplane, I'd attribute it to the computer system that goes with the airplane. A lot of what you saw in that war that was so impressive had to do with the radical improvements in computer capability.
The configuration of modern strike fighters is shaped by their missions. Ground attack falls into several categories. Close air support generally means combat missions in the immediate battle area, close to friendly forces. In these missions, the aircraft are often assigned to attack enemy tanks or troop concentrations. Accuracy of delivery is a prime requirement in close air support to avoid causing casualties to friendly forces. Another important mission for strike fighters is called battlefield interdiction. In the interdiction role, the primary targets are military forces deep behind the battle line. This could include high-value targets such as command posts and headquarters, supply bases, vital bridges, enemy artillery positions, and reserve forces moving up to the front. The requirements for this deep attack mission are very different from the close air support mission. Since the attacks will be carried out deep behind enemy lines, the strike fighter must be able to survive the onslaught of enemy air defense systems, such as radar-directed missiles. Modern strike fighters often accomplish this by relying on low-flying tactics. This tactic takes advantage of terrain features to hide the strike fighter from the prying eyes of enemy radars. We will next take a look at several of today's strike fighters, each of them a very different type of aircraft from the other, tailored to very specific attack missions. The Harrier vertical takeoff jet is a nearly unique variety of strike fighter. The only other comparable jump jet is the Soviet Navy's Yak-38 Forger. The Harrier was developed in Britain to fulfill a very special requirement. In modern air wars, air bases are a prime target. If the runways can be put out of action, the high-performance jet fighters will be unable to take off and land. The Harrier avoids this problem with its vertical takeoff and landing features. It can take off like a conventional jet, and its Rolls-Royce engine is specially configured so that the exhaust can be vented downwards, enabling the Harrier to take off and land vertically. The Harrier can operate from small clearings near the battle area, regardless of the conditions of local runways. Falklands War in 1982 demonstrated the versatility of the Harrier.
Going back to the Falklands, without the Harrier there would have been no air power for the British Navy and for the British Air Force. So we use that also in the central region and in other places. We can operate away from airfields, away from long strips, either in the woods, on ships, on strips, on a bit of tarmac roads near villages. You can use it anywhere.
The complexity of the engine arrangement on the Harrier means that the pilot has a larger array of controls in the cockpit than in more conventional fighter aircraft.
There's an extra lever next to the throttle lever, which normally for forward flight, the nozzles are pointing out, and when you want to slow down into the hover, you bring that lever back and the nozzles go down to the vertical, or to slow down even quicker forward of the vertical. And then as you slow down and the wing loses lift, then you have to replace that with engine power. So you bring up the engine to high power settings to compensate for that loss of lift. So in effect, when you're in the hover, you're sitting on a column of air from the engine.
In spite of the added complexity presented by the engine, the Harrier is popular with its flight crews due to its handling qualities.
I think it's a tremendous aircraft to fly because it's so unique. It's got the helicopter type qualities and the normal conventional aircraft qualities. You know, for instance, when you're flying around at 420 knots, 480 knots at a level, half an hour later you're hovering above a metal pad, and that is tremendous feeling, superb, and that I think is a big benefit from the pilot's point of view of the Harrier, really.
The primary mission of the RAF's Harrier GR5s is the ground attack mission, but the Falklands fighting made it clear that the Harrier can perform in the fighter role as well.
You find that we do a lot more air combat than even the air defense guys. They do radar combat, and we do a lot of aircraft-to-aircraft fighting. So a lot of our training is pure air combat. I'd imagine 40% of it. So whenever the weather is not good, or we've done a tremendous amount of low level, we go off and we do combat, and we do that as normal. And we're one of the very few ground attack aircraft that do it, simply because of the flexibility of the Harrier, as you say.
The United States Marine Corps has been a particularly enthusiastic supporter of the jump jet concept. The Marines currently fly the AV-8B Harrier, a second generation of the aircraft developed in cooperation between British Aerospace and McDonnell Douglas. The Marine pilots are as enthusiastic about its performance as their British counterparts.
Being a Harrier pilot is kind of special because I think we're the best pilots. We're the best stick and rudder men, I think, in military aviation, because it's the best of both worlds. I mean, you hover like a helicopter and you fly straight and level like a regular aircraft. So I enjoy the VSTOL part of the Harrier aviation community.
VSTOL, what is that?
Vertical short takeoff and landing.
The Harrier itself, what kind of aircraft is it to handle and fly?
It's like a little sports car. Handles very well. It's not supersonic like some of the other high-speed fighter aircraft, but it maneuvers very well, and it's very versatile as far as what you can do with the aircraft and basically where you can operate the aircraft from. And we only need a 2,000-foot aluminum strip to take off. And of course, you can land in the spot size of a tennis court. So the fun thing about Harrier aviation is where you operate the aircraft from. And of course, it's state-of-the-art, so it's got a lot of nice weapon systems in it to make it easy on you.
The Marines' interest in the Harrier can be traced to their special role in America's armed forces. The Marines have traditionally been employed as an expeditionary force, able to carry out combat assignments thousands of miles from major bases. The Harrier fits into the Marine operations, since it can operate from small carriers, called amphibious assault ships in the U.S. Navy. And once the Marines have secured a beachhead, the Harriers provide close air support from the beachhead area itself. During the Gulf War in 1991, Harrier units were the primary source of close air support for Marine ground units. The Harriers were based at forward positions not far from the Kuwait border. During the opening phases of Desert Storm, the Harriers flew strike missions well into Kuwait, attacking storage facilities, artillery positions, and other types of targets. Although the Harrier is usually viewed as a close air support aircraft for direct support of Marine ground units, it proved capable of carrying out the deep attack missions as well. This was in large part due to important improvements incorporated in the newer AV-8B Harrier II. The current version of the Harrier has nearly twice the range of the other Harrier I. Once the ground war began, the Harrier switched missions and began providing close air support for Marine ground forces during the liberation of Kuwait. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, better